Howdy there. This is Dr. Jason Munsell. This is the very first video for, I need to speak up a little bit, for our Rhetoric of Tourism class. I am really only dealing in this video with the first couple of slides in the first PowerPoint. This is sort of our very first day together. It is meant for June 3rd, 2013, which is actually tomorrow. This is I'm recording this the day before on Sunday, and I hope to have a series of videos actually for every single day because these videos could get a little bit long, I suppose. So I'm thinking, we'll see how it turns out, that I'll have this initial video that will sort of frame the class in a particular way, talking about some fancy Greek terms, and then what I will do in the next video is talk a little bit about the nature of the course in light of what the syllabus has to say, and then I will move in to some videos particularly about the assignments, and then moving on finally to a video that is about specifically the course schedule and everything like that. But all of this stuff is meant to sort of just take up the very first day. So pretend like if we were face to face, if we were in a real classroom, this is the very first day, sort of the icebreaker day, the day where we get to know one another a little bit. Okay, so if you go to the second slide on the PowerPoint, and you might want to sort of watch the PowerPoint as you are watching this, if you can sort of pull it up at the same time, or at least maybe print out the slides if you want to do that and sort of follow along. Some fancy Greek terms, because really any class on rhetoric or in rhetoric should start with fancy Greek terms. And by the way, if you notice me doing sort of a Michelle Bachmann looking away, I have some notes in front of me so I don't get completely off. I also have some notes on my palm. Freedom is good. That's more Sarah Palin, actually. So these ideas that I'm going to offer you aren't ideas necessarily highlighted in our textbook, but rather this is my big picture thinking to sort of frame the course in a particular way, as I always like to do. So the very first term that you will see in, again, the second slide of your very first PowerPoint is arete, A-R-E-T-E, with a little fancy thing above the first E. You might recall from the COM 200 class, which was also called the Survey Communication Studies class, and a lot of other classes that I have taught, I talk about this term. And in that particular class, again, to COM 200, the authors of our textbook, Boxing Plato's Shadow, Dews and Brown, talk about how early rhetoricians were trying to teach or train folks to have that arete. They sort of talked about it in their book as the ability or character to be successful in your personal lives, in your professional lives, as well as your civic lives. In a way, arete is another word for excellence, or another word for virtue, though I know excellence and virtue are slippery ideas. For example, if we used Aristotle's sort of doctrine of the mean, which I talk about in COM 100 and some other classes. Remember, the mean is in the middle. This porridge is too hot, this porridge is too cold, but this in the middle is just right. That's sort of how Aristotle talks about virtue, and that's sort of the doctrine of the mean. That arete, or virtue, or excellence, is in a sense in the middle of extremes. In those classes, I actually borrowed from Aristotle, talking about the idea of courage as a virtue, or courage as excellence. On one side of the extremes, or either side, are vices. So being cowardly, that is running away from a fair fight, would be a vice. It's on one side of an extreme. On the other side, or one side, it is the extreme. On the other side, again, if courage is in the middle, being cowardly over here, and so what's over here, the other side of the extreme, it's just sort of like being stupid. Let's say that you were trying to attack an army of 100 armed folks, or zombies, with just you and a spork from KFC with just a little bit of mashed potatoes and gravy still on it. That's just dumb. That's not arete, that's not virtue, that is a vice. Arete, virtue, excellence in the middle is indeed, as the Colonel would tell us, finger looking good. In another way, we could call it moderation. Again, the middle of extremes. So why does this matter in this class on the rhetoric of tourism? Well, I try to help students along to virtue or excellence or arete in all of my classes in my own special way. So while we are on the road, we will always be thinking about this idea, and we shall always think deeply about trying to find the middle way, the middle road. That will make much more sense probably when we get into some specifics about the class and the various concepts and everything like that. So that's the very first term that I have in on the PowerPoint. Slide 2, bullet point 1, or if you're bilingual like me, uno. The second term, and is very closely related to arete, it's pronounced eudaimonia. And in a sense, it is sort of the Greek word for happiness or for welfare, for human flourishing, or indeed the highest human good. Even as there's always sort of debate about what it means to be happy, what is good, so forth and so on. Now I use this term in part because I think it's fun to say, even though I'm probably not saying it exactly like classic scholars or classicists say it, nor how folks like Aristotle might have said it. But I'm borrowing here from a book called The Art of Travel by Alain de Botton. This is a absolutely wonderful book. You might want to pick it up someplace. It's not required, but it's just it's good stuff. And this is what he says in this book. In his very first chapter, it's called On Anticipation, when you're anticipating the processes of travels, like when you're packing, which is so much fun. If our lives are dominated, this is straight from the author, if our lives are dominated by a search for happiness, he actually has an English accent, but I won't do that for you because my English accent is very poor. Then perhaps, let me start that over, if our lives are dominated by a search for happiness, then perhaps few activities reveal as much about the dynamics of this quest in all its ardor and paradoxes than our travels. They express, however inarticulately, an understanding of what life might be about outside of the constraints of work and of the struggle for survival. Yet rarely are they considered to present philosophical problems, that is, issues requiring thought beyond the practical. We are inundated with advice on where to travel to, but we hear little of why and how we should go, even though the art of travel seems naturally to sustain a number of questions, neither so simple nor so trivial, and whose study might in modest ways contribute to an understanding of what the Greek philosophers beautifully termed eudaimonia, or human flourishing. So, like Alain de Botton, I'm trying to say that travel and thus tourist sites that we travel to via the web present sort of philosophical problems, or better yet, rhetorical problems. We're concerned with these sites. We're concerned with what they mean or what they do not mean, because things will offer certain messages that invite us to see things in a particular way. And particularly we're concerned with the messages that they offer about public memory, and how these sites sort of invite us to see the past, present, and future in certain ways. Fort Sumter, for instance, as a national park, and the tour of the site isn't just about Fort Sumter. It's not just about the Civil War. It's bigger than that. In a way, it's about the nature of humanity. Perhaps both metaphorically, then, we are traveling in and through this class, but also critically, or as a critical lens, the art of travel and the art of rhetorically critiquing places of public memory that we travel to begs us to think about the highest human good, human flourishing, and happiness. I think that sounds cool. That is the second term on the second slide of your first PowerPoint, eudaimonia. The next fancy term, it is fancy and cool and funky, and all the kids love it. If you were at our 2013 annual research lecture here at Columbia College, you would have very much enjoyed the talk by Dr. Rich Lehman from the University of North Carolina, Charlotte. The term here is teleology. It is linked, as all these terms are linked, with the idea of entelechy, which is the next bulleted term, which is basically Kenneth Burke's idea for the system of teleological thinking. Kenneth Burke is a big-time dead rhetorical scholar, and if you ever have heard of him before, I mean, I'm sure you have. I've talked about him a lot of my classes. And not only was he incredibly smart, but also incredibly sexy. That's important to note. At the sake of boring you to tears, though, which is often what I do, let me read some important passages from Dr. Lehman's fine book, The Teleological Discourse of Barack Obama, because it sort of outlines what I tend to think about telos, teleological logic, and entelechy. And the explanation for why this should matter at all in our class comes after this reading. In a sense, all of this is tied to ideas of ethics, which of course is tied to philosophy. Well, it is, but also tied to rhetoric, obviously. And so in order to entertain you this time, I cannot do an English accent or a British accent, but because I grew up in Oklahoma and because we live here in South Carolina, I can do a pretty good sort of country accent. It's sort of hyperbolic, but we'll go with that. So, this is again from his glorious book, The Teleological Discourse of Barack Obama. I start here on his page 9. Drawn from Aristotle's Nicomachean Ethics, or Nicomachean, people say it differently. Nicomachean, or Nicomachean, or Nicomachean Ethics, MacIntyre characterizes a teleological system of ethics as one founded upon 3 essential elements: untutored human nature, man as he could be if he realized his telos, and the moral precepts which enable him to pass from one state to the others. In this system, telos is often thought of as the goal or essential nature of humans. Writes MacIntyre, this is Alistair MacIntyre, writes MacIntyre, human beings, like the members of all species, have a specific nature, and that nature is such that they have certain aims and goals, such that they move by nature towards a specific telos. Obviously, what constitutes the essential nature is a critical issue for a teleological system of ethics. MacIntyre argues that in a Nicomachean ethics, Aristotle conceptualized humans' essential nature as living in relationship with each other in a harmonious political community. Specifically, for Aristotle, the telos is discovered in founding a community to achieve a common project, to bring about some good as their shared good by all those engaging in the project. In this regard, Aristotle, and by extension MacIntyre, understands the individual's telos as being an identity with the community's telos. Such a conceptualization does not, however, sublimate the individual to the community. The community is understood to be a political relationship. For Aristotle, political relationships are the relationship of free men to each other, that is, the relationship between those members of the community who both rule and are ruled over. The free self is simultaneously political subject and political sovereign. Can you see me? And I continue. Once the essential nature or telos of human is discerned, virtue, i.e. ethical behavior, is understood as those qualities which move humans toward their teleological end, while vices are those that do not. Terming the achievement of the telos as eudaimonia, the virtues are precisely those qualities, the possession of which will enable the individual to achieve eudaimonia, and the lack of which will frustrate the individual's movement toward that telos. And yet, again, to another passage, starting on page 10. For those of us, never mind. Kenneth Burke terms Aristotle's system as entelechy, because Aristotle classifies a thing by conceiving of its kind according to the perfection, that is, finishedness, of which that kind is capable. A person can never be finished, of course, and thus the telos or eudaimonia can never be fully attained. Virtue is found in the striving for the telos, living as close to the teleological virtues as possible. It is not found in the acquisition of the telos itself. And finally, the teleological system of virtues, however, does stand external to the situation. It is available for the individual to apply a priori to a situation that has not yet occurred. Further, because the telos speaks to the essence of a thing and the move toward the essence, the telos projects beyond the immediate situation. The essential nature of a thing is a potentiality, a possible finishedness, as Burke says, and thus extends externally beyond the current situation. A teleological understanding of ethics is therefore both external, a universal system, an essential nature, and internal, situational, based upon the nature of historical situated thing. Just beautiful stuff. Okay, so what the heck does that mean, and what does this have to do with this particular class? Well, in a way, this can work both metaphorically and critically, or logically. That is, we are on a journey toward a telos or goal, perhaps of arte, eudaimonia, or just a better understanding of rhetoric, memory, place, and sites of public memory. But while we're on the road, we are also thinking conceptually about how places of public memory are themselves discourses that might or might not be teleological. Do the tourist sites we travel to offer us some a priori standards or guides about what it means to be a good person, while also situationally based? Do the sites offer us a vision of a grand future while commenting on the past to deal with our present? I'm not sure, but there is something about this traveling, this journey thing that just seems really sort of cool to me. Okay, so those are the terms. And speaking of things being cool to me, you might not know this about me. I don't tell many people this, but before I went to graduate school, I was a roadie for the band AC/DC. I'm not implying by any stretch of the imagination that we are on a highway to hell, but rather a highway to swell. And that's the initial sort of icebreaker that isn't really an icebreaker. I suppose it could be. It's an online class icebreaker thing that you can do at home by yourself. So what I want you to do, and this is before we get to the syllabus, so again, pretend like we were in class and I made you do something sort of funky before we got into the syllabus. I want you to get out a piece of paper or a cocktail napkin. It all depends on where you're doing this. And I want you to draw or map out a highway. We are on the start of our journey. So think about these ideas. Where are you now from the perspective of these fancy Greek terms? What virtues or vices, what excellence do you think you have? Are you happy? Are you sad? What would make you happy? Or what would bring you closer to happiness? Then think about the end point. Though it never ends, the road never ends. We're on the road again, Willie. That's the whole teleological entelechy process that is both a priori and situational. This is just, in a sense, getting you to do this is a different way for me to ask the simple question, what the hell do you want to get out of this class? And to force you to say more than just, I want to get an A or a B. Sometimes people want D's or F's. It depends on the situation. And hopefully, when you think about this, where you are now, where you want to go, the road in between, if you actually do this. I mean, it's not for a grade. I mean, you probably will say, this is stupid, I'm not going to do this. It's just a way to sort of reflect. And if you're really, really cool, and if you have kids, maybe get out some Hot Wheels. But you just sort of think about this, because I think, you know, if you think about these ideas and then we place them within the terrain of all the various things that we'll be talking about throughout the class, and then we come out the other end, it might be sort of interesting to see what happens as we travel. To quickly summarize and to end this very first video here, the first of a series of very poor lectures, while the class is on rhetoric of tourism, and the book focuses on the very complicated concepts of rhetoric, memory, place, and the idea of public memory. We are also concerned with issues of arete, eudaimonia, teleology, and entelechy. And as President Dindorf loves to say, we are on our way. Thank you for watching this first video.